back to another episode of AIBiz, the podcast where entrepreneurship, mindset, and modern leadership intersect. I'm your host Avik, and today we are stepping into the rapidly evolving world of AI startups, but with a refreshingly grounded perspective. So, my guest today is Rick Turoczy. So, welcome to the show, Rick.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Amazing. So, Rick, like before we start, I'll quickly love to introduce you to all the listeners. Dear listeners, Rick, if you have spent any time in the startup world outside of Silicon Valley, you likely know his name. Yeah. So he has spent 30 years immersed in startup ecosystems, like most notably in Portland, Oregon, where he's built bridges, created communities, and helped hundreds of founders grow their ventures. And he's the founder and editor of Silicon Florist, co-founder of Pi, which is Portland Incubator Experiment, and the co-founder of Build Oregon. And he's mentored founders around the world, guiding them through not only the hype, but the reality of building successful companies. Yeah. And today we are digging into one of the hottest and most confusing spaces for the founders right now, which is startups that are building with AI. Oh, that's will be a great conversation, dear listeners. So why to wait? Let's get started. Welcome to the show again.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm excited about this topic. I for context for folks, when I started in the
Mm.
startup world, we were still shipping software on floppy disks and CDs. So I've seen quite a bit of change in the industry, and I'm excited about the changes we're seeing because of AI.
Yeah, exactly. And so I mean, if we talk about the mythology of AI startups, so most of the founders get stuck. So the hype around AI startup is enormous right now. Like from your years of mentoring, where do you see the founders often misunderstanding or maybe misapplying AI in their startup ideas?
Yeah, great question. Like, I think we're in very much the messy period of a new technology where for a lot of folks, they're on a substantial learning curve trying to figure out how to incorporate new technology like AI into maybe an existing solution. And so we see a lot of founders working to kind of what I call bolt on AI to an existing solution that they've developed or find ways to incorporate AI into an existing solution. Well, I think that's a really important kind of way to learn how to start to interact with AI and their product base. I think there are 2 other aspects of AI that, probably don't get all of the attention that they deserve, but are equally beneficial to founders, and one of those is simply being a customer of AI. So using AI to help you figure out aspects of your startup, maybe some of your positioning, maybe some of your marketing, maybe some of your code, but really starting to lean on AI as an asset that allows you to do things faster and more efficiently than you would be able to on your own. So that's one I always encourage founders to explore. And then the other one, slightly more difficult, but given how fast AI is evolving and how rapidly the space is changing, I'm really encouraging founders to try and think a couple steps ahead. So while you may be thinking of ways to incorporate AI into your existing product, you also need to be thinking about how users will interface with a solution in the not too distant future. So it's entirely feasible that 12 months from now, users won't even be using the application that you're building. They'll be using an
Mm.
agent or another entity that will choose to interact with that application. So, from a founder perspective, you not only need to think about how your current end user is going to evolve over the next 6 to 12 months, but you also need to think about what it would be like for agentic AI to interact with your product and use it effectively. And that's a bit of an intuitive leap for folks, but I think it's really important that people start thinking about that right now.
Exactly, I totally agree. And like that's such a key distinction. I mean, so many founders chase AI as the product instead of kind of solving real problems. Like when you, um, so I mean, when you mentor founders, how do you help them shift like from this chasing technology to focusing on meaningful value creation?
Yeah, a lot of it is I mean, a lot of it I
Uh,
always I always compare it to parenting. Like, a lot of it is you try and advise folks, you try and mentor them, but they're only going to be ready to hear the feedback when they're ready to hear it. So, often you need to support them, encourage them, let them fail or, fall and scrape their knee before you have the opportunity to kinda pick them up and help them at a time when they're really capable of ingesting the feedback and doing
mm,
something meaningful with it. So I caution people to be too prescriptive with founders. Like it really is a kind of meet in the middle kind of activity as you're helping them through these situations. When as mentors, we're often like wanting to help people resolve things more rapidly, and sometimes it takes a bit to help them understand where not only where the challenges are, but also where the opportunities are. So it's a long-term
mm,
engagement with the startup founder to help them figure this stuff out.
perfect, perfect. So, like, you have also said before that many founders overcomplicate things early. So, with AI, especially, it's easy to fall into that trap, like fancy models, data pipelines, complex integrations. So, how can early stage founders simplify their approach when working with AI so that they don't burn resources before they even find the product market fit?
Yeah. Yeah, great question. Yeah, it's challenging, right? Because I mean, even as a founder, you're excited about this new technology and you're curious about this new technology. So I would say the more objective you can become about
Mhm.
the technology, like to me, I always try and put my mindset to AI is really kind of analogous to cloud infrastructure. Like it's a way of optimizing the way your product works or the way your product is delivered. So if you can start thinking about the technology in that context, that even though it's exciting, it's really just the pipes and how things are working with your product, then you can start thinking through objectively ways you can apply that are meaningful to your product and your end user. And then, of course, like I always encourage people to go back to the basics. Like talk to your either existing customer or your potential customer or who you think the target market is.
Mm,
Learn more about how they're currently solving the problem and look for those very, very simple, basic ways that you may be able to improve that workflow with the
mm,
augmentation of AI. For some folks, it may be the chat interface that a lot of folks have incorporated. For others, it may be, looking for the way you can drive the product with voice. For other folks, it may be workflows or content generation, but I think it all comes back to spending time with that potential customer and learning about how they do things today so that you, as the founder, can make the intuitive leaps about the simple features you can deliver that will vastly improve their experience in trying to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish.
true. true. So sometimes I feel like early AI founders almost need permission to start simple. I mean, uh, do you think that the pressure to sound cutting edge in front of investors actually makes it harder for them to build something sustainable?
I do. I think, I mean, as you've touched on already, there's a mythology around startups and how companies are built that's largely inaccurate and untrue. And yet that's the public discourse around startups, is that like you have to go out and raise venture capital, or if you're not building $1 billion company, what are you even doing? Like a lot of those things impact founders adversely. And so while I think people should be paying attention to the industry, they should be paying attention to technology advances or new foundational models that may benefit them. I also encourage them to ignore the vast majority of the hype and really just kind of focus on what they want to build and how they want to build it. There are any number of successful companies that have taken alternative routes to building their products, building their businesses, because they understood the end user target market. And, I have a good friend who's like always saying the best investor is a customer who's paying you to use your product. So just be thinking through the ways that you're actually solving a problem. Don't fall prey to thinking you have to include AI, because I think that's another big pressure right now. Your product may work perfectly well without any potential AI application, and throwing an AI chatbot in there may further confuse your customer rather than help them. I've used a few solutions recently where I'm like, this chatbot is making things harder for me to accomplish what I want to accomplish rather than easier. So, if you find yourself in one of those situations where you're being pressured to add AI, but you don't think it's necessarily going to improve your end user customer experience, that's that good opportunity to start that leapfrog conversation, to start talking about the future where maybe agentic AI is interacting and how that is going to change the dynamic of your business, or change the dynamic of how end users interact with the solution you've provided. That kind of gets you out of the we need to implement this immediately kind of space, and more into the thoughtful, strategic conversations about how AI may impact your company in the future.
Hmm, that's true, definitely. So, uh, I mean, one of your superpower is connecting with people. So
Mhm.
founder to mentor, founder to customer. But many AI founders tend to isolate themselves in the code and the data. So, um, why is human connection outside of the tech, you think, so critical in the early stages, especially for the AI driven startups?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, and I'm an introvert myself, so I get it. Like, I would rather just stay behind the screen and and hide, as it were. But there are it's
Mhm.
kind of the classic issue of people will often tell you one thing. They will often tell you what they think they want, and they will often do things differently, or through observation, you will realize that what they're describing is not actually what they need or what they want. And so I think that kind of personal connection, that face to face, that
Mhm.
shadowing somebody while they're doing the work that they do, like all those points of human connection provide a really high fidelity feedback loop for founders to really uncover where the opportunities are. And you can only get that by
Mm.
being in front of somebody or in person with somebody, because as much as the technology has created the potential for us to connect, like you and I are basically halfway around the world from one another talking on Zoom, which is great, but it also gives us a false sense of connection and understanding that that can also introduce confusion or unnecessary complexity into situations.
Agree, totally agree on this. Yeah. I mean, that's true because even in AI, the users is still human at the end of the day. And uh,
Hmm.
how how do you advise the technical founders who struggle with the customer discovery process, or maybe um, building real world empathy?
Yeah, I mean, AI can honestly be a great tool for that as a thought partner. Like, you can converse with your favorite foundational model about reasoning through your ideal customer, who you should be talking to, like what types of questions might be important to ask them. I think it's a way of doing research and making yourself comfortable before you have to engage with those folks. And then, there's also the opportunity to converse with documentation or, other customer sites that may be going after the same market to leverage AI in a way to be a thought partner to help you feel more confident in engaging with those customers, but also to help prevent you from making assumptions. And I think using AI as a thought partner, my favorite thing is when it clearly doesn't understand the situation, and I need to get really remedial about helping the model understand what I'm trying to describe, because then that improves my conversations with real humans. It makes me get more remedial about the way I'm trying to solve the problem, and it's one of those situations where it would take an awful lot of time with an awful lot of people to figure out those techniques, when you can now kind of do that privately, do a lot of that homework by yourself with a thought partner AI setup.
Exactly. Right. So that's lovely. And how do you see the opportunities and challenges for AI founders who are building their companies outside of the big venture hubs? Is the playing field finally starting to even out?
I mean, I think there's still always going to be hubs of activity. Like I often say, there's the Bay Area, and then there's practically everywhere else in the world. And the vast majority of the stuff you hear is, being driven by the Bay Area storyline. So when you're outside of the Bay Area, that can be really hard to try and deal with that. I would say that the benefit of being outside of a major tech hub, like San Francisco, Seattle, New York, those kind of London, those kind of communities, is you are more likely to come up with creative solutions that aren't kind of subscribing to the general view of the world. I think you are also used to making do with less resources and being more creative and how you're building your companies and your startups, and you're not kind of beholden to needing to hit a certain threshold before you bring your product to market. So I always encourage people, especially folks
Hmm.
in smaller communities, there is a community for you probably in your hometown. Like, there are other people building startups. What you need to do is find more people in your region who are building things and doing things, because that's your community. The trying to play like a Bay Area company is not going to do you much good. People in your community are going to be the ones who are going to be most helpful to you. The challenge is just finding them and getting the chance to engage with them.
Exactly. Exactly true. So, I mean, that's really encouraging. I mean, because the narrative is often that if you are in NYC and I mean you're behind, but perhaps being outside those bubbles actually forces founders to build more sustainable companies.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. When you don't the Bay Area is that I always use as my example just because of our proximity to it. If for people who aren't familiar
Right.
with where Portland sits in the United States, we're basically the same 90-minute, 2-hour plane flight away from Seattle and San Francisco. So we're about midway between those 2 cities, so we pay a lot of attention to them, very much, the Bay Area is a complete ecosystem. Seattle is pretty close to a complete ecosystem, and ours is one where financial resources tend to be more challenging, or people tend to be a little more risk averse in the way they invest, and yes, because of that, our founders have to figure out ways to build without the same resources at their disposal. Or if they need those resources, they need to figure out how to leave the area to go get them. And that's another aspect that I think is super important for people to understand in this realm of, everybody being remote and everybody available from, on a video call is sometimes it really benefits you to get out to other communities. And that could be communities that have more potential investors. That could be where your potential customer base may be located. But again, back to that whole person to person thing, sometimes you need to get out of your immediate region and experience some other communities to see what's working there, what people are doing to get by, how the startup community is working there. That can often be super informative to others.
That's true. Yeah. And so this might sounds contradictory, but it's actually not. So um, some people argue that with open source models and no code AI platforms, technical barriers are falling. I mean, uh, that non-technical founders can now build AI companies too. So do you believe that's empowering, or is it oversimplifying the challenges that AI stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I I both agree and disagree, I guess is the best way to put it. Like, I think I love as a former developer, like, this feels like when I first started to learn to code or when I first learned, like, HTML or something very simple. Like, all these projects that I've wanted to build over time, but I either didn't have the capability of building or was too embarrassed to go ask a real developer to spend any time building, like, I can build those things now. That's really easy for me to build using AI. So I can get to prototype, or I can get to maybe MVP product. But
Mhm.
in order to scale that product, like I don't have the capacity to do that terribly effectively, and that's a significant learning curve. So it works for me and maybe a handful of users, but it's never gonna work for 100 users or 1,000 users. And then, the other aspect of that is building a product is really, really hard, but it's also probably the easiest part about building a business or a startup. It's all the other things that you have to do, that you have to juggle while you're building that product and while you're trying to build that company that are the real challenges. And while AI is starting to have impact on some of those aspects, it's still really, really hard to build even a moderately successful business. And so like, take the opportunities where you can. It is easier to build a technology product right now, but building a product does not necessarily mean that you will or can build a successful business.
Got it. Got it. Wow. So, like, and also one more thing is like, others worry that AI startups are being built too quickly or unstable kind of ethical ground. So, rushing products to market without considering long-term consequences. So should founders be more cautious, or is that showing innovation unnecessarily?
I think it's an acquired taste for people.
Mm,
Like for me, for example, I've never really subscribed to the move fast and break things kind of like mentality. Like I would like to take a more methodical and curated approach to innovation.
mm,
I'm maybe not as far as like being a Luddite or like eschewing any kind of
mm,
innovation, but I do think it's important as a founder, and especially as you start to build the team, to define what that cultural aspect of your company is. Like you need to make a decision about how you are going to be present in the world and how your business is going to be present in the world. And if you're comfortable with like, again, move fast, break things, like constant iteration, like we're at the cutting edge of AI and for good or bad, that's where we want to be. Or do you want to be a little more, a little further back on the spectrum? I don't know that there's an obvious right answer right now because of where we are in the adoption of the technology and the innovation of the technology. But I think it is important for everybody to have a well-defined point of view as to how they're going to engage in that regard. But again, I don't know that there's a right way to do it right now. And in this messy time, like should, in the dot-com days, should all of those companies, raised a whole bunch of money just because they had a website with .com on the end of it? Like when mobile apps were exploding, like did we need all those permutations of mobile apps and all that kind of thing? No, but it was a good learning experience for the community and for the founders. So, I think just be present, be cautious, and be true to yourself in terms of where you want to be in the industry.
exactly. Exactly true. Yeah. Ooh. So, I mean, what a conversation, Rick. Huh. I mean, your perspective today was exactly what founders and honestly, like many investors, need to hear this right now, because it's so easy to get lost in the um this shiny projects. But
Yeah.
uh, yeah, but your work reminds us that solid businesses are built on kind of solving the real problems, connecting with real people, focusing on the real value. So yeah, whether AI is involved or not, but it's very true. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Of course. Yeah, happy to.
Yeah, and for all the listeners, I'd love to mention, like, if you are building an AI or in any space, so take Rick's advice to heart. Start simple, stay connected, and build for people, not for the hype, right? So, Rick, if someone wants to connect with you, what would be the best medium?
Yeah, I'm easily found online. Unfortunately, I'm most known by my last name, which is not
Mm,
necessarily the easiest to spell, but it's Turoczy or Z for other folks in the UK and elsewhere. And easiest to connect with me these days, usually on LinkedIn or Blue Sky or somewhere like that. I can be found, and I'm always happy to chat with founders about the things that they're building and hopefully connecting them with other people who can be helpful.
Amazing, amazing. So, dear listeners, I'll put all the links into the show notes for easy reference. And with this hope, until next time, this is your host Avik reminding you that um, a healthy mind builds a healthy business. So, stay focused, stay curious, and as always, stay human even in the AI world. So, thank you so much.